everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at the U.S. Department of Government Efficiency.
OOGE.
DOGE, yeah, exactly. It replaced the U.S. Digital Service, and, we want to figure out, why 21 DOGE staffers resign. We've got their resignation letter. We've got this NPR article that covers the whole thing.
It's a big story.
Yeah.
And it's not just like a, gossipy story. It's a story with huge consequences, potentially.
Right.
DOGE was created to modernize and improve how the government uses technology.
Yeah.
Think about all the ways that you interact with government online, from filing taxes to accessing healthcare information. That's what DOGE was supposed to be fixing. But now with these resignations and the allegations that they're making in this letter, things might be going in a very different direction.
Okay, so this NPR article has a pretty shocking headline. 21 civil servants refuse to help dismantle public services. And then there's this quote from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, "Don't let the door kick you on the way out."
Oof, that quote is really telling. It suggests that the current administration might not be interested in hearing dissenting voices, even when those voices are coming from, experienced civil servants who have dedicated their careers to public service.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what else might be getting swept under the rug.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a little bit alarming.
So let's go to the source. Let's look at the resignation letter itself.
Yeah.
These folks, they start by affirming their commitment to serving the American people and upholding the Constitution. But they say that continuing to do so within DOGE has become impossible.
And that's a powerful statement, especially coming from people who have sworn an oath as civil servants.
Right.
They're basically saying they can no longer fulfill their duties in good conscience.
Yeah, and they lay out this timeline starting with this incident that they call the White House Visitor Badges incident on January 21st.
Oh, yeah?
And the letter describes unidentified individuals questioning employees about their political views, their technical skills, even trying to, create division among colleagues.
Yeah.
They call it a significant security risk.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, it seems like a huge understatement.
Yeah, I mean, who were these people?
Right. Yeah.
What were their intentions? This is the U.S. government we're talking about, not some secret society.
Right.
And it's incredibly unsettling to think that, unauthorized individuals had access to sensitive information and were potentially trying to influence or even intimidate government employees. And it's especially worrying given the DOGE handles, such crucial systems.
And then it gets even crazier on February 14th. 1/3 of the USDS team, people who are working on modernizing Social Security, veterans services, healthcare access, tax filing systems, disaster relief, student aid, they were abruptly terminated via an anonymous email.
Wow.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, these aren't just any systems.
Right.
These are the backbone of how the government interacts with its citizens.
Yeah.
They affect all of us. And the fact that skilled employees who are working on these critical projects were fired so abruptly raises serious concerns about, the stability and the security of these systems going forward.
Yeah.
And not to mention the human cost of losing these dedicated experts.
And that's where the resignation letter really starts to connect the dots. They describe DOGE's actions as firing technical experts, misusing sensitive data, and breaking critical systems.
And if we connect that back to Elon Musk's infamous quote about deleting entire agencies, it paints a pretty terrifying picture.
It does.
I mean, what does deleting even mean in this context? Is he talking about physically shutting down offices, merging departments, something even more radical?
Right.
The lack of clarity is just worrisome.
Okay, so the letter goes on to say that these resigning employees, they refuse to compromise government systems, put sensitive data at risk, or dismantle essential public services.
That's where they draw a line in the sand.
Yet
They're saying, we will not be complicit in actions that we believe are harmful to the public good. It's a powerful statement of principle, especially in contrast to that dismissive response from the White House.
do you remember that, what did you do last week, email that Musk sent to millions of government workers?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that wasn't just that raised a lot of legal questions.
Yeah.
Does Musk, even as a senior advisor, have the authority to demand that kind of information from government employees? It seems like a blatant disregard for established procedures. And it raises concerns about, potential abuse of power.
It does, and that ties directly back to the concerns that are raised in this resignation letter.
Yeah.
It's all starting to feel like a very troubling pattern.
It does, doesn't it? And then you have the case of Jonathan Kamens, a DOGE engineer who was fired after publicly endorsing Kamala Harris for president.
Oh, wow, I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah, it was a pretty big deal within DOGE. And it's hard not to see it as a clear case of political targeting. It sends a chilling message to other employees: toe the line or face the consequences.
So it seems like there's this clash between Musk's vision for DOGE, which seems focused on, rapid change and disruption, and the concerns of these experienced civil servants who are worried about the potential consequences of those changes.
That's more than just a clash of visions, though. It's a clash of values. On the one hand, you have the Silicon Valley mindset that prioritizes speed and innovation above all else.
Right.
And on the other hand, you have these dedicated civil servants who are committed to the slow, often messy work of building and maintaining reliable, secure systems that serve the public good. And as this story unfolds, the question becomes, which set of values will prevail? And what will the consequences be for all of us?
These are some heavy questions. Let's take a moment to let all of this sink in because it's a lot to process. It's wild to think how quickly things have changed at DOGE. I mean, just a few months ago, you had this dedicated team of civil servants quietly working behind the scenes to, make government services better. And now it's just chaos.
Yeah, the U.S. Digital Service definitely had its share of critics.
Yeah.
But, there was at least a sense that they were trying to do the right thing to actually, improve things for the public. Now it feels like everything's been turned upside down.
It's like Elon Musk came in with a wrecking ball instead of a toolbox.
That's a great analogy. Because the heart of the problem is that Musk seems to be approaching government as if it were just another tech company, another system to be optimized. Streamline, delete, move fast, break things.
Yeah.
But government's not software.
It's about people.
Exactly. It's about people with complex needs relying on systems that, yes, might be outdated and, frustrating sometimes.
Right.
But are also essential to their lives.
Yeah.
And those systems are intertwined with laws and regulations and ethics.
Right.
They can't just be, disrupted without considering the human impact.
It's like if you were trying to fix a leaky faucet, and instead of just tightening a bolt, you decided to rip out all the pipes.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
You might stop the leak, but you've also destroyed the entire plumbing system in the process. And that's what worries me about this whole DOGE situation, this rush to dismantle things without really fully understanding the potential consequences. It's incredibly risky.
And we can't forget the human cost either. I mean, those employees who were abruptly fired, they had families, livelihoods, a sense of purpose in their work. They weren't just lines of code that could be deleted, without a second thought.
Absolutely. Think about the chilling effect that this has on other government employees.
Right.
If you see your colleagues being punished for speaking up, for raising concerns, would you be willing to do the same?
Probably not.
Right. And that creates a culture of fear and silence.
Yeah.
Which is the opposite of what you need if you want to build effective and reliable systems.
It also raises questions about, transparency and accountability.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, if DOGE is operating in secrecy, firing people without explanation, making unilateral decisions,
right.
How can the public be sure that their interests are being protected?
Exactly. It's like a black box. We know stuff's going in and coming out, but we have no idea what's happening inside.
Yeah.
And that's not how government should function in a democracy. We have a right to know how our tax dollars are being spent, how decisions are being made, who's being held accountable for those decisions.
And this whole delete entire agencies idea is just terrifying.
I know.
I mean, what agencies are we talking about? What's the criteria? Who decides which agencies get deleted?
Right. It's so vague and alarming. And it speaks to this kind of technocratic mindset that sees government as this monolithic entity that can be pruned and shaped at will without considering the real-world impact on people.
So what happens to the services that those agencies provide? Do they just disappear?
That's the million-dollar question. And frankly, I don't think anyone in the current administration has a good answer. They're so focused on cutting costs and shrinking government that they seem to have forgotten what government is actually for.
Which is, kind of important, just a little bit. It's about providing essential services, protecting our rights, ensuring fairness and justice, responding to crises. Things that the private sector often isn't equipped or even motivated to do.
Yeah, and yet there's this narrative out there that government is inherently inefficient and wasteful and bureaucratic, that it needs to be disrupted by the tech industry.
Which is such a dangerous oversimplification. I mean, sure, there are inefficiencies in government, just like in any large organization.
Right.
But they're also incredibly dedicated people working really hard to serve the public good, often with limited resources and outdated technology. And sometimes those inefficiencies are there for a reason. Think about all the checks and balances that are built into our system to prevent abuse of power.
Right.
Those checks and balances can be frustrating sometimes, but they're there to protect us.
It seems like those 21 people who resigned from DOGE, they saw both sides of the coin.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They understood the potential for technology to really improve government.
Yeah.
But they also understood the need for ethical considerations, for transparency, for accountability.
Right. And when they felt those values were being threatened, they chose to speak out, even if it meant risking their careers.
Which takes a lot of courage. I mean, they could have just stayed silent and collected their paychecks.
They could have, but they chose to do what they thought was right, even though it was the harder path. And that reminds us that we all have a role to play in holding our government accountable. You know, their actions showed us that silence isn't always the best option, that sometimes speaking up, even when it's risky, is the right thing to do.
So where do we go from here? What can regular people like you and me actually do in the face of this whole DOGE situation? I mean, it's easy to feel powerless against this kind of thing.
It can feel that way, but we're not powerless. The first step is staying informed. Don't just skim the headlines. Dig deeper into the issues. Understand the complexities. And don't let the constant barrage of news numb you to the gravity of what's happening. Knowledge is power, and it's the first step towards effective action.
Welcome back to the deep dive. I mean, it's quite the rabbit hole we've gone down here.
It really is.
And it's kind of unsettling.
And like any good rabbit hole, I think this one is revealing some uncomfortable truths about, how much we rely on these government systems without always realizing it.
Yeah, I mean, we just take it for granted that our Social Security checks are going to arrive on time, that we can file taxes online,
Right.
that, emergency services are going to respond when we call 911. But all of that depends on these incredibly complex systems working behind the scenes.
Right.
And those systems are surprisingly vulnerable.
Yeah, they're not just systems, are they? They're built and maintained by real people. People with expertise and knowledge that can't easily be replaced by some algorithm.
Right. We hear so much about how tech will save us, but technology is just a tool. It's only as good as the people who are using it.
Exactly. And when you have a situation like we're seeing at DOGE, where that expertise is being purged and ethical concerns are seemingly being ignored,
Right.
it's a recipe for disaster. I mean,
Yeah.
imagine your personal information being easily hacked because the systems that are supposed to be protecting it are no longer properly maintained.
Yeah.
That's the kind of risk we're talking about.
It's like someone handing a toddler a loaded gun. They have no idea what they're doing, and the potential consequences are terrifying.
That's a very vivid image.
Yeah.
But it's true. Just because you have the technology doesn't mean you know how to use it responsibly. And in this case, the stakes couldn't be higher. We're not just talking about some abstract concepts here.
Right.
We're talking about people's lives,
Yeah.
their livelihoods, their basic rights.
This isn't just about government efficiency or whatever. It's about these fundamental values that actually make our society function.
Yes.
Transparency, accountability, fairness, due process.
Exactly.
These things can't just be tossed aside for the sake of some vague idea of progress.
Because progress without those values is just, it's terrifying. It leads to a world where technology is used to control and exploit rather than to empower and help people. And that's a future we need to actively resist.
Okay, so how do we do that? What can we as regular citizens actually do to push back against it? I mean, it's easy to feel helpless in the face of something this big.
It can feel that way, but we're not powerless. The first step is staying informed. Don't just skim the headlines. Dig deeper into the issues. Understand the complexities.
Yeah.
And, don't let the constant barrage of news numb you to the gravity of what's happening.
So read past the headlines, talk to people, ask questions.
Exactly.
What else?
Once you're informed, then you can start holding your elected officials accountable.
Yeah.
Ask them tough questions. Demand transparency.
Mhm.
Push back against policies that you feel erode our rights or undermine those crucial values that we were just talking about.
So it's not just at the national level.
No.
Local governments are becoming more and more reliant on technology too.
Absolutely.
We need to be paying attention to what's happening in our own communities.
Yes.
Engaging in local politics, making sure our voices are heard at every level.
Absolutely. Change often starts at the grassroots level. The more we engage, the harder it becomes for those empowered to operate in secrecy. And remember, you don't have to be like an expert in technology or politics to make a difference. Just being informed and engaged makes a difference.
This whole situation has been a real wake-up call for me, I think.
Yeah.
It's made me realize just how fragile these systems really are, how easily they can be disrupted, and how important it is to protect the values that actually make them work.
Yeah.
Values that benefit all of us.
It's been unsettling, for sure, but it's also been a reminder that this fight for a just and equitable future is a fight worth having, a fight we can't afford to lose. And that's not just up to the experts or the politicians.
Right.
It's up to all of us.
Well said. So to our listener out there, we leave you with this. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged. The future of our democracy depends on it.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into what's happening at DOGE. Hopefully this has sparked some questions and maybe inspired you to continue exploring these issues. Remember, the more we know, the better equipped we are to shape the world we want to live in.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep exploring.